Good afternoon. We apologize for the delay in the start of this. We had some last-minute technical difficulties in that one of our computers kept crashing. So unavoidable, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for taking time to join this capacity building for the Prenatal to 5 Home-Based and Community-Based Services RFP. I'm Michelle Sarju, and I'm the Program Manager for the Community-Based Services Strategy of Best Starts for Kids, and I will be collaborating with my coworker Melanie Maltry, who is the Home-Based Services Manager. So you will get to see both of us. I just want to clarify that this is the capacity building for Prenatal to 5 RFP, not to be confused with technical assistance. You thought you were here for technical assistance, you feel free to stay. I also want to ask you to make sure you mute yourselves so as we don't get a lot of feedback and background noise. There is someone who will be who is working with us today to answer any questions that you have. So we have a whole team of folks here. Okay.
Hang on.
1 second. Got feedback. Okay. All right. We think we fixed that. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As you will see in the next slide, our agenda for today is an overview of Best Starts for Kids. We're going to talk about key elements of the proposal, and then we will have a question and answer period. We anticipate having about an hour and 15 minutes today, and so I think we're going to have plenty of time at the end for your questions. So for those of you who haven't joined a Best Starts for Kids presentation before, this will be new information, and for those of you who have, this is probably going to be repetitive, but we cover it in every single webinar. So the goal of Best Starts for Kids is that we want to see more babies born healthy, kids thriving, and more young people to grow up being happy, healthy, successful adults. In the Prenatal to 5 strategy, we're working towards 3 results, which are, as you can see on your screen, babies are born healthy and provided with a strong foundation, that the county, specifically King County, is a place where everyone has equitable opportunities to be safe and healthy as they progress through childhood, through their academic careers, and attaining life skills to be thriving members of their communities. And then third is that communities offer safe and welcoming as well as healthy environments that help improve outcomes for all of King County's children and families, regardless of where they live. Some of you may know that King County has an equity and social justice initiative, and in particular, Best Starts recognizes that there are persistent inequities that exist in some of our communities, and especially by race and place, and that in many cases, for some communities, outcomes are getting worse and threatening the collective prosperity of all of us. And so we are working to invest in organizations that are reflective of and embedded in the communities that they serve, and those that recognize and address the disparities and the disproportionalities that exist in our communities. So as a result, these persistent and intensifying, as a result of these persistent and intensifying inequities, BSK will focus on investments in communities where those inequities are the greatest. All right, so we're going to dive into the specific content of the RFP right now. So the purpose of this RFP, RFP purpose? Okay. Like I said, this is a team effort. You want to go ahead and advance the slide? Okay, so the purpose of this RFP is that we are seeking proposals from individual organizations or collaborations among organizations to provide capacity building supports to service providers that are or will be funded by BSK to provide the following services to young children and their families across King County. So the two areas are home-based services and then the community-based parenting and education support programs, which are actually part of the community-based services BSK strategy. In just a minute, we'll look at the definition of capacity building supports. These TA supports are, as I said, for two of the prenatal to 5 programs. There are others. So we'll start with home-based services overview. So the home-based services strategy consists of evidence-based, evidence-informed, and community-designed home-based programs and practices, as you can see on the slide. So there have already been awarded 11 evidence-based and evidence-informed organizations. So they have been awarded, they're actually in the contracting phase. Some of them are actually implementing programs at this time. And it says, what is this funded programs?
Sure, just a quick note for you that the programs that were funded are cited in the RFP, and you may want to look at those and think about them as you're sort of designing your capacity building work. But the programs that were funded are listed in the RFP.
Okay, that was Melanie. I wasn't sure where that was. I thought I was missing something, but I'm not. Okay, so those are the evidence-based and evidence-informed home visiting programs. And then not yet released is the community-designed home-based programs and practices. And those, that particular RFP will be coming out probably within the next 2 to 4 weeks. But the community-designed programs are programs that draw upon community-defined evidence and or practices and use an approach that are designed for and implemented in a specific community. So the expectation is that they be valued by that community, that these programs be valued by that specific community, embedded in cultural and social conditions, and then considered effective and supportive by the families within the community they serve.
Make just one quick note, and I do want to describe the funding levels for those programs quickly. So for the 11 evidence-based and evidence-informed programs, they were sort of allowed to craft their budget around the number of families they were proposing to serve, but most of those awards are between about $150,000 and $275,000, and their funding is for 3 years. So it does allow a sustained amount of time to really work with those programs. And for our 10 community-designed programs and practices, those will be structured as 6-month planning and capacity building awards. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. And then they will receive 2 years of funding at $250,000 each year, plus base funds and an annual increase. So I think it's just important to talk about the fact that these are very sizable programs with moderately sustainable funding for a couple of years.
All right. And then the other strategy is the community-based parenting, which is going to be an RFP that is released in late April, early May. And it actually is going to be a 2-part RFP, but for this particular capacity building RFP that we're talking today, this capacity building RFP will only support the parenting, education, supports, and information for caregivers RFP. So I just want to be clear about that because there will be one. The community-based parenting will actually come out in 2 different RFPs at different times. So for this particular strategy, these programs are going to provide supports on a variety of topics, not limited to, but including parenting training information. So for example, a series of parenting education classes that, might be designed in such a way as, 0 to 2, and then maybe 2 to 5 that will be dependent upon the organization providing the service. This particular RFP will also include incorporating information on the social emotional developmental needs of young children, prenatal to 5, or I should say 0 to 5 at that point, And then important health-related needs of children and families. And so these particular areas will be very well defined in the RFP, but this just provides you with an overview. And so at this point, I am going to move out of the picture, and you're going to get to hear from Melanie, who you've been hearing from, but you actually get to see her now.
Sorry, I just can't keep my mouth shut.
I'm glad you didn't.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Hi, my name is Melanie. I'm the Home-Based Services Manager with Best Starts for Kids. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time just taking a deeper dive on the strategy section of the request for proposals before we dive into some of the other elements. Michelle will cover those. So we've been talking a lot about capacity building so far and who we're providing capacity building to, but we really haven't talked about what that means. So embedded in the RFP are two definitions, and one is for capacity building and one is for what we're calling capacity building supports, what sometimes is called technical assistance, but as Michelle described early on, we're really trying to distinguish capacity building supports from technical assistance focused on RFP development, which was another RFP that we ran, another set of services that we funded. So capacity building we're defining as a process through which individuals, programs, organizations, and systems obtain and/or strengthen assets and capabilities they need to effectively and equitably provide services to and improved outcomes in partnership with families and communities. And that is a mouthful, but worth highlighting a couple of things there. When we think about capacity building, we are thinking about multiple levels. How do we build the capacity of individuals, of programs, of organizations that our programs sit in, and the systems that they directly connect with in order to do their work. So I do think that's an important thing to highlight, that the focus is both on increasing the effectiveness of programs and on the equity of programs. And really, I think we would ask the question, can we be effective if we're not being equitable? So those are really two important dimensions of that definition. And then for us, capacity building is in partnership with families and communities. When we think about capacity building supports, we're thinking about the provision of information, tools, and resources on best practices, along with individualized, responsive, and ongoing coaching and support to strengthen programs, organizations, and system capabilities. So we really think of being in close relationship with the providers and the families who are going to be engaged in this process, and not just sort of the training and handing off the work. So it's really going to be about a customized, responsive set of technical assistance supports, capacity building supports. Okay, and as I'm sure you've observed in the RFP, we're really thinking about this work as being shaped by two different capacity building frameworks. And part of our work together will be in really thinking about how we can utilize these frameworks together. So it will be a bit developmental, and we know that there will be some upfront meetings and things like that in order to really co-create that process. So the two integrated approaches that are important to us in thinking about capacity building are an implementation science framework called the Formula for Success, and also utilization of an equity lens in implementation. So let's unpack each of those just a little bit. The first one is the Formula for Success, and the Formula for Success basically says that in order to get to outcomes, you need three things: well-defined programs, effective implementation, and supportive environments. Often we think just in terms of programs. Do we have a good program? However, there's all sorts of research that shows that you need all three of these things. And in fact, if any one piece isn't in place, it's really hard to get to outcomes. So what do we mean by each of these? Our well-defined programs are strategies or programs or interventions or innovations, whatever you want to call them, that are supported by evidence and that could be community-defined evidence, or that can be traditional research evidence. They should be feasible to implement, they should fit the needs of the community, and they have to be adequately defined. The National Implementation Science Research Network says that to be well-defined innovations must be teachable, learnable, doable, and accessible, so measurable. The effective implementation piece is really about intentional and visible infrastructure needed to put a program or an innovation into practice. These are sometimes called the implementation drivers. We'll take a look at those in just a second. And the final element is supportive environments. And these are the conditions that really facilitate rather than impede good implementation. So they are supportive environments. They're built through implementation teams, through strong communication, through partnership with communities, and the ongoing use of data. So it's really that community level feedback loop that lets programs and lets systems know when things are barriers or aren't working well, so that we can partner to remove those and to do our pieces better. So you'll see that this is how, around these three discrete elements, is how the RFP is structured. I did just want to take a quick dive into the implementation drivers slide. You'll find that embedded in the RFP. I'll just briefly say that when you're taking a look at these implementation drivers, those drivers, the competency drivers on the left side, which are really focused on staffing or staff competency, this RFP is heavily focused on those drivers on the right side, and those are called the organization drivers. And these are really around using data for decision-making and improvement, strong organizational culture and administrative supports, and then connection to service systems. And the third piece down on the bottom, leadership drivers, is also critical, but again, we really are honing in on the organizational drivers piece. As we start this body of work in future RFPs, we will likely cover some of the other elements. And of course, really vital to all of this work is using an equity lens. And this means a couple of different things to us. First, we're really thinking about using an equity lens in how we engage. So what are the power dynamics between systems representative, between providers, between families, and between our capacity building support providers? And so some of the things that we're going to be thinking about and assessing proposals on are your knowledge and understanding of how disparities and disproportionalities really impact small CBOs from marginalized communities, the importance of validating deep community knowledge and expertise of community needs and assets, awareness of how power dynamics play out among capacity building providers, CBOs, communities, and then really co-creation methods. And so rather than being sort of top-down in your TA approaches, how are you co-creating? How are you intentionally drawing upon the input of service providers and communities to develop capacity building solutions? So that's one element that we're thinking of when we're thinking about an equity lens. And then we're also thinking, how do we apply an equity lens to these implementation driver frameworks, to these implementation science frameworks? And I think this is a real opportunity to do some field building here, both around capacity building supports, as well as around implementation science and equity. So what we mean here is that when we think about that bucket, well-defined programs, we're thinking about things like how do you partner with community to co-create, co-develop programs that meet their needs? When we think about effective implementation and integrating equity, we would want to think about things like, for thinking about a decision support data system, how is that informed by equity? How are we supporting programs in disaggregation of data using community input to interpret data, things like that? And then also when we think about some of our organizational practices, or what's called facilitative administration sometimes, again, how are we overlaying an equity lens? So for example, if we are working really hard to hire staff who have cultural match with the community served, how do we build an organization? How do we embed organizational human resource policies that create inclusive environments for our staff who are representative of community. Again, there are a lot more details about that in the RFP and the kinds of things that we're looking for, but just wanted to hit on that. And finally, with supportive environments, how are we engaging diverse community voice in systems design and ongoing feedback? Okay, so I did want to note here, because I know this is confusing, but we can imagine one of two scenarios here, and I think when you're thinking about your RFP, you can conceptualize it in one of two ways. So first, applicants can assemble a team of their own partners that meet the required skills and assets outlined in the RFP. So you'll see, for example, that the budget reflects partners, and the application allows you to include partners. So you can build your own team. And we also understand that this is a really diverse set of expertise that we're looking for. And so when we receive and review the applications, we may also invite discrete elements of a particular proposal and partner you with other capacity building providers to do the development work. Again, we really think of this as a partnership to develop the capacity building approach. And so you're really bringing your strengths and assets to the table to inform the design and development of a body of work. Okay. So for the first bucket of dollars that are available in this RFP, it is for well-defined programs. There's $400,000 available. This is it's a pretty short body of work, but it will be an intensive body of work. These contracts will run from July 1 to March 31. You can request up to $400,000, and we anticipate between 1 and 4 awards. At the beginning of this conversation, Michelle shared sort of the scope of the potential recipients of these capacity building supports. This section applies only to 2 of those 3. It's for the 10 community designed and the 6 to 8, community design home-based and 6 to 8 community-based parenting support. And what we will do together is we will partner with those programs awarded through these 2 grants to develop the following products. We are considering these program development activities, and those will be a practice profile. Within the RFP, we've provided a hyperlink to a practice profile. Those are very intensive processes, so we will sort of right-size them to the scope of work that we have. You'll support programs in developing a theory of change, an implementation plan, and a 2-year program budget. As it says on the right side of the screen, the core responsibilities are around co-designing a capacity building process. We imagine there will be some mutual learning among the group. Some groups may need to build some capacity and equity. Others may need to learn some of the nomenclature around implementation science. We think of that as 2 ways. We'll be learning all the way around. You'll be expected to develop and implement workshops and tools, and then again to provide individualized, culturally competent capacity building supports with small community-based organizations. For the practice profile work, you may be supporting literature reviews or also engaging in community data collection processes in the case of community-defined evidence. You'll be doing basic project management, so tracking progress and providing support to your set of assigned capacity building recipient organizations. We will, across all of this body of work, be documenting the capacity building approach, so you may have some discrete element of that. You will be required to participate in data collection efforts by the BSK evaluation team, and participate in regular project management team meetings with BSK staff. The next bucket of work is around effective implementation. There is $525,000 available for this. This is a longer project. As you can see here, it's about 1.25 years. An applicant may request up to $525,000, and there are an anticipated range of between 1 and 4 awards. This will be for all of those programs we talked about, so 11 evidence-based and evidence-informed, 10 community designed home-based, and 6 to 8 community-based parenting education. The sort of tasks associated with this body of work are building and using teams within funded agencies to support the rollout of implementation plans. It will be assessing and building the capacity in prioritized organization drivers, in particular building decision support data systems and also building organizational competency. The scope of work we imagine around decision support data system would be things like assessing and making recommendations for data system purchases that are right-sized to the organization, collecting and using data with an equity lens, generating and using reports, and using data for decision making and improvement. On the organizational competency side, some of the things we imagine will happen in year 1 are using program feedback to align agency policy and procedures, embedding equity goals in strategic planning and budgeting processes, conducting equity impact assessments, supporting human resources to develop policies and procedures to support hiring, maintenance, and promotion of diverse staff and building an inclusive culture, and also other areas of organizational effectiveness. I will not read all of these right now, but I do want to just point out to you that there's sort of a slightly different body of work associated with the evidence-based and evidence-informed home visiting than with the community design home-based programs and practices and community-based parenting support and education. So I would just look at those 2 different scopes of work. They're a little bit different. Both of them will really involve partnering to develop a set of capacity building priorities that are customized for each organization. Yeah, that's good. Okay, in the home stretch here, the last bucket is around supportive environments. So the funds available for this bucket of work are $75,000. The contract period is August 1, 2018 to December 31, 2018. Applicants may request up to the full amount, and we anticipate that this will be one award. It could be that there were a partnership, so again, you can apply as a partnership here, but likely there will only be one award. So what is supportive environments? We think about the focus of supportive environments as being the home-based service system and families and communities. So we will invest in an organization or a partnership of organizations to develop a home-based services partnership group comprised of families, community-based organizations, and systems partners. And this is really, as I said before, it's to build the capacity of our service system to be responsive to families and to be responsive to community-based providers. So some of the responsibilities associated with this work are assembling and regularly convening a membership group with representation from diverse communities, formalizing that group, so developing values, operating procedures, roles, regular standing meetings. You can determine the frequency of those meetings. A big role will be gathering both input to inform design and also gathering feedback to improve from the group to equitably inform decisions about home-based services strategies. So when we release RFPs, for example, we would love this group to vet and provide recommendations on the RFPs we develop. We want to improve service coordination among home-based providers. We know that we are rapidly putting dollars into the community for a lot of home-based services. So how do we really effectively coordinate among these programs? Do things like making sure that there are warm handoffs between a prenatal focused program to a 2 to 5 focused home-based program. This relates, of course, to the development of our Help Me Grow system. So we would be using this venue in order to gather information on designing the Help Me Grow system. There's all sorts of home visiting model specific issues that come up all the time, whether that's nurse-family partnership or parents as teachers, parent-child home program. This would be the venue to really resolve any issues that come up. And of course, we want to think more holistically about the integration of equity and cultural competency in our home-based services more broadly. And then, of course, there's always lots of policy issues and priorities that are emergent. And how wonderful to have an opportunity to already have a group in place where we can think about and tackle policy issues that arise as soon as they arise. It will involve things like participating in CQI sessions for home-based services data to support interpretation and improvement. And of course, implementing data collection processes with our home-based service providers and with families in order to reduce systems barrier and strengthen policy and practice issues while ensuring authentic both family voice and also, I would say, provider voice. So I am going to hand it back over to Michelle, who's going to tackle some of the additional requests for proposal, recommendations, and thoughts.
Thanks, Melanie. Go to the next slide. All right. Partnership. I think it's really clear in this slide that we want to see agencies partnering together to actually deliver what we've outlined in this particular RFP. As Melanie stated earlier, we fully expect that there will be several awards made for this capacity building RFP because we actually don't believe that any one organization possesses all of what we need for this particular body of work. And so we would like to see partnerships that are actually prioritizing and have demonstrated a prior use of an equity lens. We want to see partnerships that have experience in a co-creation type method to develop and improve programs and strategies. We'd like to see partnerships that have expertise working with organizations that have a range of different capacities, both cultural and linguistic assets. I mean, that what we're referring to there are, out of the 11 and 10 and 6 to 8 numbers that we gave you earlier, there's going to be a diverse range of experience where organizations are at in their development. And so we feel like it's really, really important that for this particular RFP that award recipients be able to work with this broad range of communities and organizations that we expect will receive services. Number 4 on the slide is partnerships that have some level of expertise in implementation science or other methods and best practices in organizational development, capacity building, and or technical assistance. And then we really hope that one or all of these partnerships will have a deep connection or embedding in the community, in the communities that are facing significant disparities by both race and place. Okay, this project has been awarded an external evaluation, and so there will be an evaluation components. The providers will participate in a capacity building theory of change development process to guide our approach to this particular capacity building. And then award providers will be awarded providers. So for this particular RFP will be required to participate in ongoing evaluation activities. Okay, so this is a timeline. As you can see, we issued the RFP on March 20th. It's due April 24th, and then we expect to be able to notify agencies who have been awarded, also those who haven't been awarded, around the end of May. And then the contract dates, as you can see, I'm not going to read them, but just note the different pieces of work and the time frame that they're connected to. Okay, so for this particular RFP, we are encouraging you to carefully review the rating criteria. As we do in other RFPs, we are highlighting this because the review panel, this is how we're actually going to decide who is awarded this particular RFP. All proposals will go through a formal review process, and if you haven't been involved in this before, the review process actually contains community members, Best Starts for Kids and King County staff, as well as subject matter experts. And so it isn't just Melanie and I sitting around reviewing proposals and making decisions. It's actually a team of people who will come together to talk about all of the submitted proposals and then make recommendations that we will then forward on to the Best Starts for Kids leadership staff. And then as stated in any RFP, there is an appeals process, and you can read all about that. We're not going to go into it, but should you not get an award, there is a specific appeals process that you can activate. Okay, so now we're going to talk about application and budget. So application tips, you can apply as a single person or an organization as a partnership. You need to be specifically clear about which approach you're taking, whether that's individual org or a partnership, and about the elements within the application area you are applying for. So for example, you only want to request $50,000 to support the decision support data system of the effective implementation components. You just need to be clear about that. So whatever your piece is that you feel like you're most qualified to do and that you want to apply for, just be very clear in your application about that. And then as a reminder, we may assemble a team if all areas of expertise are not covered in one proposal. We anticipate they will not be all covered. So that goes back to really our encouragement around partnerships, because we think that the way we're going to get what we need out of this is for a variety of experts in different areas to partner together to deliver this work. Okay, so now on to some tips. Be sure to select which of the capacity building components, whether that's well-defined programs, effective implementation, supportive environments, or all three if you choose. And as you can see, the dates again are outlined for the specific bodies of work. I need to say more to that.
I would just add, oh, you already said it, but when you select which box, make sure you indicate the dollar amount you're asking for each discrete element.
Okay. All applicants must complete the section labeled knowledge and experience, applying key frameworks. So what you need to do here is you need to provide a brief overview of your organization and or your proposed partnership. You need to identify how your organization and partnership integrates race and equity, cultural competency. Another way to think about that is cultural versatility frameworks and practices into your capacity building and technical assistance strategies. We ask that you provide clear examples that actually demonstrate that. And then third, how does your organization or partnership integrate an implementation science or other relevant organizational developmental framework and practices into your capacity building and technical assistance strategy? So just be clear in those particular areas. Be sure to complete all corresponding questions for the sections that you are applying. So you need to, in this particular section, which should be no more than 5 pages, you need to describe how your organization or partnerships experience partnering with community-based organizations, relate to implementation teams, data quality and improvement systems such as assessing needs, making recommendations, and providing those tools and supports for data system selection, and customization. I'm not going to read all of that, but those are just some of the examples. And then organizational competencies and infrastructure, which is around assessing needs, making recommendations, and providing tools and supports for building operational capacities with an equity lens. So such as how might you work with an agency around their financial management or human resources. Some of these organizations are not going to have that embedded in their agencies. So how would you work to help support them in those areas?
That's great. Just to be super clear, I just want to make sure that everyone understands. Everyone, if you're applying for section A, B, or C, has to answer questions 1, 2, and 3. And then for each color-coded section that you're applying for, you'll answer the corresponding set of questions. So Michelle just walked you through effective implementation. There's a similar set of questions for usable, not usable innovations.
Effective implementation, well-defined programs.
Well-defined programs, thank you, sorry, we renamed it. Well-defined programs, and then a similar set of questions for supportive environment.
Thanks for that clarification. And then some sections request example products. This is really important. So for example, in this particular example, you need to attach 2 examples of products you have partnered to co-create and explain why you chose them. So that's just an example. But the important thing is that you actually provide what is being asked in the question. Okay, so now for the budget. The budgets should be developed for the length of the contract. So as you can see, again, we over and over again list the dates because they are important, and they provide not just timeframes, but expectations of when the work should be completed. If you're applying as one organization, you only need to use the budget that's labeled the lead applicant. So as you can see on that screenshot, there are multiple partners, but if you are if you're only applying as one organization, then you just select the lead applicant. And then if it's multiple individuals or orgs that are applying as a partnership, you need to detail the individual budgets. Any clarification on that, Melanie? Nope.
Perfect.
Okay. You can budget by an hourly rate or FTE depending on your structure, but as you can see, it lists out the position. It gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 positions. I think if you needed to add more, you could, but you need to make sure that those specific sections are adequately filled out. And then read the instructions. I know that seems kind of basic, but sometimes what we found is that the instructions weren't carefully read, and so not all the questions were answered. Anything in particular on that? Okay. All right, additional resources. So for those of you who have applied to BSK, you know that all of your questions go to this particular address, which means that you are actually not to email Melanie and I. You could easily get our emails, but you are actually not to directly contact us. You send all of your questions to CPRES, and the purpose for that is that those questions get published publicly so everybody can benefit from what the answers to the questions. So if you accidentally send us a question, then we will forward it on, but we will not respond to you directly. If you are interested in knowing about how we define certain terms, there is a glossary of terms, and then make sure you complete the checklist. The checklist is provided so that you don't forget anything.
Just quickly, I'm sorry, I noticed an error that I didn't catch when I was preparing the PowerPoint slide. The second arrow that says no more than 6 pages, disregard that. The page specifications are within the application itself. So it's 1 single space page for questions 1, 2, and 3. I think it's 5 single space pages for the other sections. And if you're applying for multiple sections, of course, your application is going to be cumulative. So I'm sorry I didn't catch that. I'll delete that, but please disregard it.
So the PowerPoint that will actually be available for you to download will actually reflect that change. And I will just say, we have a standard template. And so almost with every RFP, we catch something you have no idea how our eyes look at so much text. And we inevitably catch something that has carried over from another PowerPoint presentation. So the important thing to know is that this PowerPoint will be uploaded to the blog and it will be the correct PowerPoint. So if there were other, for example, typos or a mistake, that will be corrected and then the correct PowerPoint will be uploaded to the blog. So I just want to make that statement. And now it looks like we have time for questions. I don't know how much time, but we have time for questions.
Lots of time.
We have lots of time, according to Melanie. I can't see the clock. So should I read the question?
Yeah,
So where am I starting? This one? Right here. Do I start with the Hi Marion? Oh, okay. Can you please publish the length of the 11 e-based programs, the 10 community designed home visiting programs?
Sure. So the 11 evidence-based and evidence-informed programs are embedded already in the RFP in a footnote. I could probably ascertain what page it's on really quickly if I can flip through here. Those are listed on page 4 of the RFP. The community design programs and practices will go live right now. The target date is April 6th. So those will be selected at a later time. And of course, once we know what those programs are, we will inform the TA providers who've been have been hired. We had to do a little finessing to line up all of these bodies of work. But it will work out, we think.
Yeah. So it's the same with the community-based parenting strategy orgs. Those are going to go live after the community designed home-based services. And so we won't know necessarily who those we will not know who those organizations are prior to the award for this particular RFP, the Capacity Building Support RFP. But we're pretty sure about the number. And so I think it's safe to say that there will be an additional 10 to 6 to 8, so around 18 other organizations that may require some capacity building support. And with those particular RFPs, the awardees that are awarded those RFPs actually will not have a choice about whether they do this. It will be a requirement as a part of the award. So that's something I don't think we necessarily covered, but I just want to highlight that.
Yeah, so two nuances to that, I guess, are that, so we built in the 6-month planning grants for community designed and for the for Michelle's bucket and the community-based parenting supports. And so we are hoping to have the capacity building team assembled in contract and operational before we hit the ground with that body of work.
Yeah. You want to read that question?
Sure.
I think that's more technical than I can answer.
Is it appropriate for organizations to submit proposals for only one aspect of effective implementation? Proposal only for data-driven decision-making, or is it the expectation that organizations or partnerships submit proposals for the entire body of work with the understanding that BSK may choose to award the organization a contract only for one aspect? Sure. So I think as we tried to sort of communicate, we don't think that it's possible that any one organization is bringing all of these areas of expertise to the table. And so we need to build a team. And I think that you can do that in one of two ways, by developing your own partnership or by applying in your area of expertise, and then we would select from among the different sort of capacities we need in order to build a team, right, with sort of all of those bodies of knowledge to then co-design and implement the capacity building support. So if you have expertise in one area, you should apply in one area, unless you want to partner with another organization that you know has expertise and you're applying together in two areas. And we have neither, we don't have a preference or recommendation, but you should absolutely just apply for your area of expertise if you're not intentionally forming partnerships. Are subcontractors allowed? If so, can the budget include a non-specific subcontractor line item to allow for addressing emerging needs of community designed programs? For example, allowing unspecified subcontracting budget for translators, community expertise, etc. Michelle is nodding her head, and I think that would be appropriate. And I would say that you will be evaluated on, so I think that's an adaptable strategy, and you will be evaluated based on certain capacities that you're bringing to the table. So I would sort of think about that a little bit.
I was shaking my head because I was like, okay, I understand this question. Not that the answer, so you can only see me, you can't see Melanie. I'm so sorry about that. But you've seen her, so you know we look very different. So, get your questions. All right. Your device is causing poor audio quality. Sorry about that. Okay. We don't have any more questions unless someone is like fast and furiously typing.
Why don't we wait for a minute? Is that okay?
Yeah, and we have a lot of folks on the phone. So what we can do now, sorry, this is the comm support now speaking. I am going to unmute you, which really just means I have now given you the option to unmute yourself. So if you are joining us from the phone and you would like to ask a question, you still need to unmute yourself, but you have the ability to do that now, and then we'll be able to hear you.
And we're okay with the silence, just FYI.
Okay.
All right. Well, I guess we're done with the silence, and we're going to move on to, are we ending? Okay. All right. So I think we're going to end. One person typing. Okay, we're going to wait. You can go ahead and finish. We could actually see that you were going to, I don't know.
It was a lot of pressure.
It was P. Scott. P. Scott, you may ask your question. I'm outed. I'm still trying to understand whether this RFP is focused on creating capacity in organizations or within the community. A lot of the lingo you're using, I'm not familiar with. That's actually a really good question. Somebody's calling. Oh, we're going to ignore that.
Yeah, ignore that.
So Yes. And Melanie can feel free to chime in here. It is focused on creating capacity within organizations, but that translates to within the community as well. So I think it depends on the organization and what type of services they're providing. So, for example, some organizations are direct service. And so, in that sense, where it would be more so creating capacity within the organization to provide the highest quality direct service work that they're doing. If it's an organization, for example, that may be a collaborative that is working with a variety of different types of people within the community, it could also be both organizational and community capacity building. So it really depends on the organization that gets awarded. And I think maybe you could give an example from like the current home-based services awardees.
Well, I guess what I was thinking is there are sort of different levels of community capacity building in the different buckets.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, when I think about supportive environments, that is literally about building an organization of community members, families, service providers, systems reps, and other partners who literally feed back up to the system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there you're doing a lot of community capacity building. And then I think about like the usable innovations component or the well-defined programs component.
Yeah.
And that is really, I mean, what is community there? If you're dealing with small community-based organizations and you are partnering with community members and families and also representatives of this community-based organization, you are building capacity at the program level, the organizational level, and also the community level. And so I think maybe, I don't know if it's definitions we're using or semantics, but I don't know, I guess that's sort of how I'm thinking about them a little bit. It's both and.
Yeah, it's a both and. I mean, ultimately, if you are selected as an awardee, you are working directly with an organization. So there is, inherent in that, you are working to help that particular organization build its capacity around whatever type of work that they're doing. And so I do think it's both and. I'm thinking about, for example, in the community-based parenting and education supports, for example, there could be an organization who has been over the years providing parent education classes, but they haven't been able to do it as broadly or as deeply in the community as they would like to, because let's say financial resources weren't there. And so they've just, they've been doing really good work and really hard work, but it hasn't been in a truly focused way that would build their capacity to provide that at a greater level or a deeper level. The other thing I think that is important to think about from the BSK perspective is that, right now, the voters have chosen to, the voters chose to approve this levy for 6 years, and there is no guarantee that that's going to happen again. I mean, obviously, we hope that it does because we really can't change outcomes in 6 years. But the other piece of this is that through this work, organizations are actually building their individual capacity to be able to go for other funding. And I think that that's an important piece that while we're not directly saying that, the work that we're doing positions organizations to be in a very different position than they would have been had we not been able to do this kind of work with them. So I think it's broader than what we've outlined in this RFP, and I also think that there are some unknowns, right? In terms of, is this strictly going to be organizational capacity building? Is it going to be community capacity building? Is it going to be a hybrid or a combination of both? So hopefully that answers your question.
That was not a simple answer.
No, it wasn't. But, this isn't simple work either.
Yeah.
We have someone who I won't out typing a question. or typing a message. Kind of take a few minutes for it to. All right, I'm not sure that that person actually decided to hit the send button on their message. So unless we see that someone is typing a message in the next couple of seconds, we're going to go ahead and, there it is. Okay, so it says, okay, thanks, that is helpful. For further questions, I presume that specific questions about a specific project should be directed to the CPress email. That is correct. Yes. All right, well, thank you all for taking time out of your day. Again, the question email is cpress@kingcounty.gov. If we sign off here and you have something that just urgently came to your mind after that, cpress, what is there a typo?
Oh, okay.
cpress-bsk@kingcounty.gov. So there, oh, it just popped up in the questions. We will fix this again. Oh, look at that. Magically, it's being fixed. I actually don't know how that works. I couldn't do that, so there we have it.
There we go. Fixed.
That's important. It's fixed. But anyway, the PowerPoint that will be uploaded later on will actually have any other typos or corrections that we find we need to fix. So look for that on the BSK blog. And for now, I hope that you are not at work until 6 or 7 tonight and that you will get to go home and have a decent dinner with your families, because that's really what I want to do, because I'm starving. But that's okay.
Okay.
All right.